Wow.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Chris. I'm from Structured Fabrication. I got a unique project here. We are delivering this 599 running engine stand to my good buddy Jim at the Throttlestop. Today's the first day he's going to see it, and I am extremely proud of it and super happy for him to take a look at it and see what he thinks.
Chris, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
For sure.
This has been a worthy project for you, about a 3-year endeavor. And it became kind of stillborn with a previous person that we had putting the engine together. And so I got down on my knees and said, Chris, please take this and make it happen. and that's what you did.
Yeah, that usually it doesn't take you that much to get me to do something for you. I usually, you always give me unique projects, and I love tackling them. So.
Oh man, this is a dream. 599 engines, they don't come along every day.
Yeah.
And then having them run, boy, oh boy, oh boy. I just have a million questions for you, and why don't we just get started? Okay.
Sure.
So, you took an engine that had an incredibly complex wiring harness. And I recall you sending me pictures of this thing, and the wires are literally laying over the back. And I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea how Chris is going to get this to run. So tell us how you got this thing to run.
After doing all the research and going through the paces and getting this close to getting the engine running on the factory ECU, we ended up going with the Haltech R5. And it's their Nexus generation, their newest ECU. It is the kit and caboodle, as you would say. It made it very easy for me to get this thing running.
Well, I know that you sent the ECU out somewhere to be unlocked.
I did, yes. So when I was trying to get it running before, like I said, I went through the paces. I went through all the wiring. I got the OBD2 working. I could access all the sensors. I can fire all the injectors. I could do all that. But the immobilizer was keeping the ECUs from firing. And so what I did was I sent the ECU out to ECU specialty, or specialized ECU, I believe they're called. And they detuned the immobilizer. They defeated them. I get it back. I plug it in. Doesn't work. At that point, I call them back and they go, you know, you probably are going to need the body control modules on that specific model. 599, as you know, pretty rare. It's not like anybody knows everything about these things. So I basically, at that moment, I did some research and I had to decide, were these giant body control modules, which might not work, worth it? And I need 2 of them, they're X amount of dollars, so on and so forth. So that's when you and I spoke on the phone and I said, hey, I think we got to pull an audible. I think we got to do a aftermarket ECU. I did my research. Haltech has always been a great brand. And then we decided to go this way. So.
Yeah. So the phone calls were that this is a 599 motor. It's also, I believe, the motor that was used in the Enzo, slightly, with the intake slightly different. And we're just not going to find all these parts.
Yeah.
The fact that we got this engine is a miracle as it was. And what we got, we got. We got an ECU, we got the wiring, but there's a lot of other things that we didn't get. And
yeah.
So it's what we had to work with. So I am super thankful that that Haltech system, that you were able to get this fired up. So when you got the system fired up then, what did you have to do in order to make it fit for purpose for us to run here?
It's universal. Haltech's universal. So like I believe this system's up to like 16 cylinders or so. You just wire it in, you follow their diagrams. And then I gave you like a booklet that came with this thing that I made a spreadsheet with all the pinouts, and I did all the research and all that, I have all that stuff. But you basically just wire it all in, you use their diagrams, and then you program it, and then you got to go in, and you kind of need to know a little bit of advanced tuning. You set your triggers, your homes, basically your injectors. It gives you a fuel map, ignition map, and then this thing will pretty much fire up. And then from there, you kind of dial it in. So it's nothing too crazy. And the fact is, we're not making any real power on this thing. It's just an engine revving on its stand. Yeah. So there's no load. So we never really got to get into the power map or anything like that. So it was relatively straightforward.
Okay, so, and then, so you build these beautiful engine stands. Can you describe the safety feature with this wall here first, and then how you handle a cooling? Because the radiator is like under the motor. Yeah. So that's a little complex.
Sure. Yeah, so if you take a look, I mean, obviously, I just built a little firewall, a little half firewall. And that's just, I did it a few inches taller than the fuel cell. And then I did the exhaust coming out the opposite side. Pretty straightforward why I did that. I also set the person operating the engine stand on the opposite corner of where the engine was going to be exhausting. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. All the fuel stuff and important electronics are on that side of the firewall, engine on this side. And then as far as the cooling system goes, the reason why the radiator is down is because you have numerous stands here that a guy previous to me, who has since retired, had built, and he'd set them down. And more or less it's for the aesthetics, so they can see all the pulleys move, you can see all that, everything going on. And I didn't want to, I'm assuming he didn't want everything to cover it up, and I had agreed with that. I was a little bit worried and concerned that the cooling wouldn't be sufficient with the radiator being flat like that, which is why I made this port here so that I could fill from the top. And it basically, the airflow, I use an airlift. So really, you just suck vacuum and you push coolant. So all the galleys are all filled. So air just gets sucked completely out, coolant gets filled completely in. This thing will idle at 30 minutes at 190 degrees. Perfect. So.
Okay. So. Wonderful. This doesn't have a transmission. So my understanding is that there was about 30 of these 599 V12/Enzo motors that were manuals.
Sure.
And the rest of them were these super 6-speed automatics, kind of like F1 technology. Those things shifted like 100 milliseconds or something like that, some unbelievably quick shift. So we don't have a transmission on here. What did you do with the back? Does this have a flywheel on it?
It does, yeah. You need the flywheel in order to get the starter to spin, in order to get it to crank over. Basically, it's got no clutch. I replaced all the bolts where everything would be mated. I just basically put bolts in there, and then I created a custom cover so that nobody would catch their fingers on it. So it's a safety plate, and it looks kind of nice too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So we have battery, fuel cell, gauges. What's that?
This is an oil tank.
So that's the external oil tank.
Yeah, this was kind of a hard thing for this motor. So luckily, I have a lot of good friends, and I was able to build the tank and get that all designed up. But Ferrari usually they have their own oil tank, right, for these dry sumps.
Yeah.
And they also have the line set that's come in. And when I was looking at those line sets, one, the tank was hideous, and I wouldn't be able to make it look good on this. But two, the line sets were like a couple grand a piece. So luckily, one of my buddies was able to help me machine and design adapters, so I was able to use AN fittings and use AN lines and just create the oiling system and complete it.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
The toolbox is pretty interesting because it looks like a regular toolbox, and you would go, well, what's in there? But you put the ECU in there.
Yep.
So it's all basically hidden, but you can open the toolbox up and get at it.
Yep.
That's pretty ingenious.
Yeah.
And here we have how many fuel pumps do we have here?
There's only one fuel pump, a pre-filter and a post-filter.
Okay, so there's 3. And then how did you determine the fuel pressure to set it at?
So everything that I spec'd out said 43.5, which is pretty common. You just set it at 43.5. You set it in the computer at 43.5, and away you go.
Okay. Well, Chris, I've never really heard a Ferrari 599 motor with no mufflers on an engine stand at the throttle stop. So would you take us through this, please?
I'd love to.
All right. Wow. That was incredible. Oh boy. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there anybody that you'd like to thank along the way that helped you out here?
Yeah.
Because this is incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my buddy Jason. He just helps me with all the odds and ends and keeps me tinkering through this thing. My good buddy Paul for helping me machine all the parts. My good buddy John at Optimum Coating in West Allis for helping with all the powder coating needs. The guys at Lake Forest, Illinois, with all the original wiring diagrams and stuff like that. And a bunch of dudes on Ferrari Chat. They were a big help, and they kind of led me in the right directions. Thanks to all you guys. We're able to get the project done and get it here to where it is today.
Well, I am completely blown away by this, Chris. I'm just taken back by how cool this is.
Good. I'm glad you like it.
Oh my gosh. 3 years, beginning to end.
Yeah, it was a long project.
You know, you were in it for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So, boy, am I glad you were up here that day where I just said, help me.
Yeah, I'm always a phone call away.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, thank you so much, Chris.
Absolutely,
I
man.
really appreciate it.
Absolutely.